Hi, my name is Peter Nelson. I am president of Nelson Insurance Advisors. We specialize in using non-woke Catholic fraternal insurance companies in order to protect our clients and members, whether it be in regards to life insurance or retirement planning. We have over 23 years of experience in the insurance industry, and we want to do business with people that believe the way that we believe. So please reach out to us at 423-793-2613, or you can find us on our website at nelsonplan.com. God bless and Godspeed.
A court ruling came down yesterday that I'll go over some of the background on here in a moment in a relatively short live stream today, because my family and I are heading on the road today. I will be live streaming and having content as usual on this channel during my family trip, but we need to get on the road. So we're going to keep this one relatively short today. But I'm going to give you some background on this case because it's a big deal. This is nothing to ignore. The Little Sisters of the Poor lost in court yesterday. Now, the battle's not over, at least not yet. And a lot of this could be dealt with by Congress, because what you're going to see is the limitation of executive action by the President of the United States to do things that are unequivocally good, and how they can be undone by an evil actor like Joe Biden. So I'm going to bluntly call the man evil, because what kind of Catholic goes after religious orders, tries to force them to violate their conscience? What kind of Catholic does that? Well, we already know the answer to that. Here's the news yesterday from the Becket Fund. They're a nonprofit, nonpartisan law firm that protects the free expression of all religious traditions, from Anglicans to Zoroastrians. And they were the ones representing the Little Sisters of the Poor. And this is, they posted this late, on August 13th, but this didn't really start hitting the news till yesterday. Breaking: in a nationwide ruling against the Trump administration religious conscience rule, a federal district court today ruled against the Little Sisters of the Poor. The court sided with Pennsylvania and New Jersey in their years-long effort to reduce the Little Sisters of the Poor to provide contraception and the sacrifice to Moloch coverage in their healthcare plans. Today's ruling keeps that effort alive, and the Little Sisters have vowed to appeal the decision. They've been doing this for a decade now. And then it goes a little bit on to their background here. I'm going to give you a slightly different way of going over the background. Here's basically what they are. They were an international congregation of Catholic nuns founded in 1839 by Saint Jean Jugen of France. My apologies for my pronunciation. Sorry, I looked it up. Still can't do it. They dedicate their lives to caring for the elderly poor, operating homes in multiple countries, including the United States. And in this case, this has to do with employees of a retirement home that they operate, how they're expected by the courts to provide these immoral options through insurance to the employees. The conflict arose from the ACA, or the Obamacare Act, as people tend to call it, which was enacted in 2010 under the Obama administration. And it mandated that employer-provided health insurance coverage cover all FDA-approved contraceptives, including the ones that will, like the week after pill, that will end end new life, and do it at no cost to the employees. Which is, by the way, not how insurance works anyway. They'll just increase the premiums across the board and not blink when they do it to cover the cost of those medications. Religious organizations were initially exempt in the 2010 rule, but the accommodation process for nonprofit religious entities required them to sign a form opting out, which the Little Sisters and others viewed as complicity in providing contraception. So they said no, even to the opt-out form, because if they felt that by doing so would make them complicit, probably through their funding of the insurance process itself. In August of 2011, the Department of Health and Human Services issued the mandate for these services as part of the Obamacare Act. The Little Sisters, they operate homes like the Saints Peter and Paul home in Pennsylvania, which is where this case comes from. They objected, arguing that complying, even via opt-out forms, violate the religious beliefs under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993. They were represented by the Becket Fund for Religious Liberty and sought legal protection. Again, we're talking 15 years of court cases at this point. They filed their lawsuit in 2023 challenging the mandate. On December 31st, 2013, the liberal Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor, also a Catholic, granted an emergency injunction, temporarily protecting the Little Sisters from fines, which would have been up to $70 million annually for not complying, while their case was reviewed. Now, I want to think about this for a second. The Obama administration was going to fine a group of nuns who care for the elderly $70 million a year for not providing these services that violate their religious conscience. $70 million a year. That would bankrupt this organization without question. We're talking now 12 years later. So we're talking, what, $800 million in fines? There are major corporations that might have a hard time absorbing that cost, let alone a group of nuns. Now, the 10th Circuit Court in 2015 to 2016 heard the case. They ruled against the Little Sisters back then in 2015 to 2016, upholding the mandate's accommodation is not substantially burdening the religious exercise. Remember, the Supreme Court didn't overturn the decision. It just said they didn't have to worry about fines and things while these played out in the lower courts. The nuns appealed to the Supreme Court, which consolidated their case with others in the Zubik v. Burwell case of 2016. And because it wasn't just the Little Sisters, it was like every religious organization that was reasonably orthodox in adhering to their professed beliefs. The Supreme Court in May of that year vacated lower court rulings, remanded the case, encouraging the government and plaintiffs to find a compromise. No final ruling was issued, leaving the issue unresolved. Now, this is May of 2016. That's tail end of the Obama administration. Very different Supreme Court than what we have now. In 2017, the Trump administration issued what's called an interim rule, expanding exemptions for religious and moral objectors, including the Little Sisters from the contraception mandate. This aimed to resolve the conflict without further litigation. And what immediately happened? Well, Pennsylvania and New Jersey, blue states, at the time anyway, blue states, sued, arguing the rule violated the Obamacare Act and administrative law. Now, administrative law is an interesting thing because a lot of times administrative law has its own set of justices, or own set of judges rather, and they're usually like law involving bureaucrats. And bureaucrats being allowed to make rules for the implementation of policies, and those rules almost never get heard by Congress, never get reviewed. And when they do, it would take an act of Congress to overturn them. This is when they talk about the embedded state, this is what they're talking about. The permanent bureaucratic state that can gum up the works of any administration. It's gotten way out of hand. It was a gift given to us by essentially Woodrow Wilson. I mean, there were bureaucrats going back to practically the founding of the country, but Woodrow Wilson and the progressive era of the beginning of the 20th century, and especially under FDR, just took on a life of their own. And this is the madness we got out of what they did to government. So states like Pennsylvania and Jersey sued, claiming this violated the Obamacare Act. The Little Sisters of the Poor, Saints Peter and Paul Home versus Pennsylvania, reached the Supreme Court. In 2020, they ruled 7-2 in Little Sisters of the Poor that the Trump administration had the authority to expand exemptions, meaning that the Little Sisters won at the end of near the end of Trump's first term. The majority opinion written by Justice Clarence Thomas upheld the nuns' right to opt out without signing the accommodation form. That should have been the end of it. And then evil Joe Biden gets in with he took office in January 2021, sought to reinstate the mandate with modifications. In 2021, the Health and Human Services under his administration proposed rules to narrow those exemptions, which then led to more court cases. That's how we got here. The Little Sisters of the Poor keep getting caught up by Catholic politicians. And it's non-Catholic politicians who are conservative who keep defending their right to actually be Catholic. And it's the Catholic politicians that seem to want to just grind these nuns into dust. $70 million a year in fines. Now think about that. It's a big story. Pray that this gets resolved, hopefully through an act of Congress. That becomes much harder to deal with. Now, the problem is The U.S. Senate is run by spineless Republicans who will not do one simple thing to make it so they can pass legislation. And that one simple thing is this. Everybody talks about getting rid of the filibuster. I, as a traditionalist, like the filibuster. It's part of the traditions of the Senate. And it's not even a bad tradition. The problem with the filibuster is no one's required to actually filibuster. You see, a filibuster is this. Traditionally, if you wanted to filibuster something, you would be expected to stand as a senator, not in the House, in the U.S. Senate, and speak until practically the end of time. Until either you got too tired to keep going, or your colleagues finally got tired of listening to you and gave in. Now they just invoke a filibuster without actually making anybody filibuster. It's a novel idea, and maybe Senate leadership should bring the filibuster back because there functionally is not a filibuster. There's just a threat of one. Make these people stand up and tell people that they believe nuns should be forced to violate their religious vows or be sued into extinction. Tell that to the public. Public who may not agree with the nuns will not agree with suing these, with them being destroyed by the U.S. government. That's what they should do, but they won't do it. And I don't know why. Maybe it's because they fear at some point in the not too distant future, Democrats will run the Congress and they will be expected to, do their job and actually do filibusters themselves, which has never really been a Republican thing anyway, as far as I can tell from reading of history, but I might be wrong. If you can come up with a example of a traditional filibuster done by a Republican, meaning he's standing up in the Senate and speaking at length for days without stopping, or many, many hours without stopping on a topic, let me know in the comments. I'd love to know what it is. So pray for the little sisters of the poor. They've vowed to continue fighting. The Beckett Fund will be helping them out with their legal costs and with representing them in court. This is one of the more important court cases, and it should not be ignored just because it kind of lacks a lot of the glitz and glamour of other things. And at the very basics of this, and it's a complicating factor, and I'm glad the Supreme Court doesn't go this way, but other judges probably will. And it's this. The Catholic Church says no to contraception, but what do many Catholics do anyway? They use it. Something like 80% of Catholics use it. And that's a problem. And how many Catholic organizations signed that waiver? Probably a lot of them. I'm curious what you think of this. Let me know in the comments. Pray for these nuns. They need prayers, and pray that the so-called conservatives in the U.S. Senate just invoke their normal rules and enforce their rules. That will make it so they can pass legislation. Evelyn says, Lord knows politicians are all full of hot air. Yeah, it shouldn't be hard for them to talk about this. It's hard for them to do an actual filibuster. They love the sound of their own voice more than any podcaster does. Now, yeah, Diane says, trying to destroy nuns that care for the extremely poor elderly. Yeah, a Catholic president changed the rules of things to make it so it would be easier to destroy nuns who care for the poor elderly. I don't even understand the thinking behind this, except for one possibility. There's enough evidence that he wasn't actually running his own administration anyway. We saw that with the auto pen stuff. And so, speaking of these kinds of issues, something came through my X feed yesterday, and I just want to show it to you. This came from Matthew Hazel on X. For those who don't know him, he's contributes to the New Liturgical Movement blog and Rorate Caeli, and he's associate member of the Liturgy Society. He's commenting here on a piece in the tablet. Maybe I'll go over it in greater detail in the future, but the tablet published an article called Pope Leo XIV, The First 100 Days. Now, the tablet is a progressive Catholic website. There's no other way to describe it. And Mr. Hazel says the following here about the author, Mary McAleese, and I've covered her on this channel before. In her article for the tablet, she says, quote, Leo's comments on marriage and the sacrifice to Moloch could have been made by Benedict or John Paul II or Paul VI or Pius XI. In terms of adherence to magisterial teaching, the signs are Leo will be closer to Benedict than to Francis. And he says, is this supposed to be bad? So we're talking here, this is, I think, directly related in a way to the Little Sisters of the Poor problem. because many Catholics just reject the church's teaching on morality of the flesh in all of its forms. They think you should ignore God's great command to be fruitful and multiply by using artificial barriers to preventing things from happening. And it's not much of a slippery slope from there to also just categorically rejecting the church's teaching on engaging in activities suited to the married state outside of the married state, or engaging in acts that are a parody of them, of the kind that James Martin seems to have an unholy interest in. These things are all related. And so it's important to recognize that the Little Sisters of the Poor are not facing this persecution in isolation. Now, I'm curious what you have to say about this. Let me know in the comments, please. I'll close with this. Damon Keller is right. Today, Friday, August 15th, which is also a holy day of obligation, it is the 100th anniversary year of Our Lady requesting that the 5 first Saturdays be instituted as a devotion. Watch what happens around the world. Or at the very least, you've got a couple of weeks. Plan for starting the 5 first Saturdays devotion. I have videos on this channel about that. You have to go to Mass for 5 consecutive first Saturdays, and no, your Vigil Mass does not count, because a Vigil Mass is a Mass that fulfills a Sunday obligation. So it's not going to fulfill the 5 first Saturdays. So your best bet is to find a Mass that is dedicated, usually offered Saturday morning, and it's dedicated to the 5 first Saturdays. Most of those that I've ever seen have been offered at traditional Latin Mass parishes. There are a few Novus Ordo parishes out there that do it as well. But find a 5 first Saturdays Mass, and if not, find a parish that offers at least a Saturday during the day, not Sunday, observed Mass, meaning not your Vigil Mass. Those are more common. You can go to Mass those days, follow the rest of the instructions on the 5 first Saturdays devotion, and start keeping the 5 first Saturdays, 5 consecutive first Saturdays. Watch the videos I have on this channel about it. They'll help you through it, or just Google 5 first Saturdays devotion. You'll find everything you need to know. I'm curious what you have to say about all this, though, so let me know in the comments, please. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. Sharing this on social media helps as well. And while my family and I will be on the road for the next several days, there will be videos and live streams daily, assuming my traveling computer system works well with the internet system in the places we'll be traveling. So please pray for whoever the patron saint of the internet is. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.